Oh my God. What's happening? Why is he doing this every night? Sana whispered to herself, her voice shaky, a mixture of fear and confusion. She sat in the dimly lit room, her heart racing, as she stared at the dog lying quietly next to her bed. The room smelled faintly of lavender, the scent that always calmed her, yet tonight it did nothing to ease the growing unease in her chest. For weeks, Shadow had been sneaking into her room at night, curling up next to her, as if he belonged there. It wasn't the first time a dog had found its way into her life. In fact, her childhood was filled with dogs, each one having a different story, but none of them had ever done this. None of them had ever stayed like Shadow. At first, she thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was cold, maybe he just wanted some comfort. But now, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more. Something deeper. She had heard of dogs being loyal, of them comforting their owners, but this was different. Shadow was a stray. He had appeared out of nowhere, following her home one night, and before she knew it, he was part of her life. And every night, without fail, he would sneak into her room, crawl into bed with her, and lie there, almost as if he was guarding her. It felt strange, but at the same time, there was a sense of relief. Why tonight, Shadow? Sana thought, her eyes flickering toward the door as she waited for him to leave. But the dog didn't move. He stayed there, still and quiet, as if he was waiting for something. The silence between them grew heavier. Sana tried to ignore it, tried to convince herself that it wasn't important. After all, the dog had never hurt her. He was gentle, always so calm, and yet, there was something unsettling about the way he looked at her sometimes. His eyes were intense, watching her, as if he knew something she didn't. Her thoughts wandered to the past. There was something about dogs that always made her nervous, ever since she was little. The memory of that one painful incident she'd tried to forget, when a dog attacked her, leaving her with scars that not only marked her body but also her heart. But Shadow wasn't like that. He wasn't dangerous. He seemed kind, in a way that was hard to explain. Sana felt a strange warmth from his presence, something she hadn't felt in a long time. But this warmth was different. It wasn't just the physical comfort of having a dog in her bed, it was like a connection, like he was trying to reach out to her in a way that words could not. She shivered, but it wasn't from the cold. She reached out tentatively, her hand brushing against Shadow's soft fur. "What is it, Shadow?" she whispered. The dog didn't respond, but she could feel his steady presence, like he was there to keep her safe, to keep her from the dark thoughts that constantly clouded her mind. The nights had started to feel less lonely since Shadow's arrival. Even though her heart was heavy with the weight of her parents' divorce, and everything in her life felt broken, the dog seemed to fill the empty space. But tonight, something felt different. Something in the air was thick with unspoken words, and she couldn't ignore the growing anxiety gnawing at her. As she lay there, staring at the ceiling, she heard the faintest sound, a scratching at the door. Shadow's ears perked up. He growled softly, the first time he had shown any sign of aggression. "What is it?" Sana thought again, her heart skipping a beat. Shadow's eyes, dark and full of mystery, met hers for a brief moment. He stood up slowly, still growling, and walked to the door. Sana's breathing quickened as she sat up, confused and a little afraid. Was there someone out there? Or was Shadow simply being protective of her? She wasn't sure what to think, but the uncertainty was starting to feel suffocating. Shadow had never acted like this before. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Shadow turned and looked at her once more before scratching at the door again. She hesitated but then stood up and approached him. Slowly, she opened the door. The hallway outside was empty. No one was there. Her mind raced, but before she could make sense of it, Shadow padded back to her bed, curled up beside her again, as if nothing had happened. Sana swallowed hard, her heart still pounding. She closed the door, locking it this time, and sat back down. There was a growing sense of unease in her chest now. What was that about, she thought, but no answers came. As the dog settled back into his usual spot beside her, she felt a strange mix of comfort and fear. Why had Shadow reacted that way? It was then that the thought crossed her mind, a thought she couldn't shake. Was this dog trying to protect me? She lay back down, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind swirled with the mystery of it all. Was there something she didn't understand about Shadow? Something deeper that was beyond her grasp? She closed her eyes, but the unanswered question lingered, haunting her thoughts. And in the quiet darkness of the night, she couldn't help but feel like she was on the edge of something she hadn't yet figured out. Something that might change everything. The next morning, Sana woke up with a heavy heart. The strange feeling from the night before still lingered, like an unanswered question hanging in the air. She rubbed her eyes and sat up, the room bathed in the soft glow of the morning light. But as she glanced toward the corner where Shadow usually slept, she was surprised to find the spot empty. Where's he gone, she thought, a small sense of panic rising in her chest. The dog had never left her side without her noticing before. It was as if he knew exactly when to show up, always at night, when she needed him most. The comfort of his presence had become a lifeline in the chaos of her life, but now, with him gone, she felt strangely lost. She stood up, her feet cold against the wooden floor, and walked to the kitchen, hoping to find him there. But the house was eerily quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. There was no sign of the dog anywhere. Her thoughts wandered back to the night before, to the way Shadow had acted, how he had scratched at the door as though something was out there. What had caused him to act like that? It was so unlike him. The thought gnawed at her. Just then, she heard the familiar sound of paws padding on the floor behind her. She turned around, relieved to see Shadow standing in the doorway, looking at her with those intense eyes. But there was something different about him now, something more urgent, like he had seen or sensed something that had caused him to act so strangely. "Shadow, where were you?" she asked softly, her voice filled with concern. The dog didn't respond, of course, but he approached her, nuzzling his head against her hand, seeking her touch. Sana bent down and stroked his fur, trying to calm the unease that was slowly building inside her. Suddenly, there was a sharp knock at the door, startling both her and the dog. She froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by a voice calling out from the other side. "Sana, it's me, your mom. Can you come down for a second?" Sana's heart sank. Her mom had been distant ever since the divorce, and their interactions were often brief and strained. She didn't know what this was about, but the tension in the air made her hesitate. As she made her way to the door, Shadow stood beside her, his ears alert and his posture rigid, as if he was ready to protect her from whatever might come next. She opened the door to find her mother standing there, her face worn and tired. There was something in her eyes, something that looked like regret, like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. "What's going on?" Sana asked, trying to mask the uncertainty in her voice. She had hoped her mom would just talk to her, but it felt like something was off today. Her mom didn't answer right away, her gaze drifting to the dog standing beside Sana, as though she had only just noticed him. "Shadow, he's been with you all night, hasn't he?" her mother finally said, her voice quiet. Sana nodded, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Yes, but he's been acting strange. Last night, he scratched at the door, like he was trying to warn me about something. It's been happening a lot lately, and I don't know what it means." Her mother didn't seem shocked, but there was a flicker of something in her expression, something Sana couldn't quite place. She stepped inside, her eyes moving between her daughter and the dog. "Sana, there's something I need to tell you," her mother said, her voice trembling slightly. Sana's heart began to race. What was going on? Why did her mom seem so uneasy? I never told you this before, but when you were younger, there was an incident, an event involving a dog. A dog that you were very attached to. But it wasn't just any dog. It was one that, well, it tried to protect you, her mother said, her voice faltering slightly. Sana's stomach twisted. A dog trying to protect her? She couldn't remember such a thing. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother took a deep breath, as though preparing herself to speak something painful. "It happened when you were about 6. You were playing in the park, and a dog, an aggressive one, attacked you. But there was another dog, a stray, that came out of nowhere and chased the attacking dog away. It saved you, Sana." Sana's mind reeled. She had never heard this story. She had never been told about any dog saving her life. The memory was buried deep inside her, hidden away for reasons she couldn't understand. Her heart pounded as her mother continued. "The dog that saved you, it was the same breed as Shadow. I never told you, but I knew, deep down, I always knew that somehow, it was meant to be. That dog, like Shadow, was trying to protect you." Sana felt as though the world had shifted beneath her feet. Her eyes went to Shadow, who was quietly standing by her side, his dark eyes staring up at her with an almost knowing gaze. Could it be possible? Was it possible that Shadow had somehow known this history, somehow sensed her pain, and had come to help her? The thought made her dizzy. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, "It saved you, Sana." Sana didn't know what to say. She felt numb, her mind trying to process the weight of her mother's confession. Shadow had been here to protect her. Just like that other dog had tried to protect her all those years ago. The silence in the room stretched on, broken only by the soft sound of Shadow's breathing. It was as though he understood the conversation better than anyone in the room. It was as if he knew that this was more than just a random act of kindness, he had come into her life for a reason. Sana looked down at him, her heart heavy with questions. What was he trying to tell her? What had brought him here? But the answers, it seemed, were not something that could be easily understood. Not yet. As the truth began to sink in, the world outside seemed to fall away. The only thing that mattered now was Shadow, This dog who had somehow known her pain before she even knew it herself. And yet, despite the shock of it all, a strange sense of comfort washed over her. She wasn't alone anymore. The days following the conversation with her mother felt like a blur. Sana couldn't shake the revelation that Shadow had somehow been sent to her, like a guardian spirit, to protect her from something she hadn't even known she was running from. The truth about her past, the dog that had saved her, haunted her thoughts, but the presence of Shadow, his calm demeanor, his steady companionship, was the only thing that kept her grounded. Every night, the dog still came to her bed, curling up beside her, just like he had from the beginning. But now, there was an unspoken understanding between them. She no longer saw him just as a dog, but as something more, something deeply connected to her, a silent protector sent to heal her in ways she hadn't even known she needed. Yet, despite the comfort, there was a strange undercurrent of unease that refused to leave. There were times when Shadow would behave oddly, like he was watching something invisible in the room, his ears perked, eyes locked on a spot that seemed to hold some secret. The unease grew, especially at night. There were moments when Sana would lie awake, staring into the darkness, feeling as though someone, or something, was watching her. It wasn't a sense of fear, but more like an unsettled feeling that she couldn't explain. One evening, after another restless night of sleep, Sana woke to the feeling that something was wrong. Shadow wasn't beside her. She sat up quickly, scanning the room for him, but he was nowhere to be found. Panic shot through her chest. Where was he? She rushed out of bed, her feet hitting the cold floor with a sharp slap. The house was still and quiet, except for the distant ticking of the clock in the hallway. She called out softly, "Shadow?" Her voice trembled, the quiet of the house swallowing her words. Sana searched the entire house, checking every room, but there was no sign of him. Her heart pounded louder with each passing second. Where could he have gone? It didn't make sense. Shadow never wandered off like this. He always stayed close, always in the same room as her, like he was guarding her, keeping her safe. Frustration bubbled up inside her as she finally went outside, the cold night air biting at her skin. The yard was empty, and the neighborhood felt unnaturally silent. It was almost as if the entire world had stopped moving, leaving her alone in the stillness. Her mind raced. Why would he leave now? What's happening? Suddenly, she heard a soft sound coming from the edge of the yard. A low growl. Sana froze. It was Shadow. She turned quickly, running toward the sound, her breath coming out in frantic bursts. When she reached the corner of the yard, her eyes locked on the sight in front of her. Shadow was standing, his fur bristled, his body tense, as if he were facing an invisible threat. His eyes were wide, his focus unblinking as he stared at the shadowy trees in the distance. Sana stood still for a moment, watching him. There was something unnerving about the way he looked at the trees, as though there was something, or someone, there. The feeling of dread that had been lingering inside her all week intensified, settling deep into her bones. She called out to him, but he didn't move. Her heart was in her throat. The growl came again, low and steady, but there was something in his stance that made her realize he wasn't growling at anything she could see. He was protecting her, guarding her against something unseen. Sana's voice broke through the silence, shaky and desperate. "Shadow, what's wrong? What is it?" Shadow turned his head slowly to look at her, his eyes filled with something that resembled urgency. Then, as if deciding it was time, he moved toward her, pushing against her side as if to guide her back inside the house. "Okay," she whispered, confusion and fear flooding her. She slowly began to walk back toward the house, with Shadow leading the way, his body constantly alert. It was as though he knew something she didn't. Once they were back inside, Sana closed the door, still breathing heavily, her thoughts spinning. What had just happened? Why had Shadow reacted like that? It wasn't like him to be this unsettled. And why hadn't she seen or felt anything? Her mind raced back to the story her mother had told her, about the dog that had saved her, how it had protected her from the attacking dog. She'd never asked her mother for more details, but now the thought was gnawing at her. Was it possible that the past was catching up with her? That whatever the dog had protected her from, whatever it had sensed, had somehow found its way back into her life? She turned to Shadow, who had settled quietly by the door, his eyes watching her with that familiar intensity. The moment was strange. Even though the house felt warm and safe, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Something had changed. Shadow wasn't just a dog, he was a part of something bigger, something she hadn't fully understood yet. He was here to protect her, but from what? Suddenly, there was a soft knock at the door. The sound was so quiet, it almost felt like it had come from inside her mind. Sana's heart skipped a beat. Her hand hovered over the door handle, uncertainty flooding her. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The knocking stopped. For a moment, the silence felt unbearable. She hesitated, then slowly turned the handle. The door creaked open. And there, standing in the dim hallway, was a figure she didn't recognize, a man, cloaked in shadow, his features obscured by the dim light. Shadow immediately stood, his fur bristling, eyes narrowing as he growled low and deep. Sana's pulse raced. She stepped back instinctively, her heart pounding in her chest. What was going on? Why was this stranger standing there? The man's voice was calm, almost soothing, but there was a hidden edge to it. I'm looking for someone. Someone you know, or rather, someone you don't know. He paused, his eyes scanning the room. I'm not here to harm you, but I need to speak with you. Sana's throat went dry. She glanced at Shadow, whose growl intensified. Whatever was happening, whatever Shadow had sensed, it was real. The stranger was part of it. And now, everything that had been buried deep inside her was about to come to the surface. What do you want? She finally asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. The man's smile was unsettling, like he knew something she didn't. It's not what I want, he said softly. It's what he wants. He pointed to Shadow. And in that moment, Sana's world seemed to tilt. Something was unfolding, something beyond her comprehension, and it was happening now. Sana's heart hammered in her chest as the man's words sank in. The chill in the air seemed to deepen, and for the first time since Shadow had entered her life, she felt truly afraid. The stranger's calm demeanor only made her anxiety worse. His eyes, dark and intense, never left her as he stood in the doorway, as if daring her to move or ask another question. Shadow's growl deepened, the fur along his back standing on end. It was as if he recognized this man, or worse, had been expecting him. Sana's mind raced, the feeling of being caught in something far bigger than her reached its peak. Her entire body trembled, but she forced herself to speak. What do you mean, he wants something? She asked, her voice shaky but determined. Her gaze flickered to Shadow, whose eyes were now locked onto the stranger, and then back to the man. The stranger smiled, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. It's not that simple, he said softly. You're connected to this dog, but not the way you think. There's something about him, something ancient. Shadow isn't just any stray dog. He's part of something far larger than you could ever understand. Sana felt the weight of his words settle in her chest like a stone. What was this man talking about? Her eyes darted from Shadow to the stranger, the fear rising within her like a storm threatening to break. Stop, Sana managed, holding her hands out as if to ward off the overwhelming truth she couldn't yet grasp. What do you want from me? Why are you here? Her mind was spinning, and she wasn't sure who to trust or what to believe anymore. The man stepped forward slightly, his eyes glinting in the dim light. I told you, I'm not here to harm you. I'm here to warn you. He glanced down at Shadow, who was now standing protectively in front of Sana, his eyes never leaving the stranger's face. There's a reason why this dog has stayed by your side all this time. It's not just because he's a stray, or because you've been lonely. Shadow was sent to you because you are in danger. His voice softened, but the words landed with the force of 100 storms. You have no idea what you've stumbled into, Sana. This is bigger than you, bigger than him. Sana's breath caught in her throat. Danger? What did he mean by that? Her mind raced back to everything that had happened over the past few weeks, the strange behavior of Shadow, the way he'd acted when the man had knocked, and the strange feeling that had settled over her. What are you talking about? Sana whispered. Who are you? The man's expression darkened. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is the connection you share with this dog. And what you need to understand is that Shadow isn't just a protector. He's a guide. A guardian for something far more ancient than either of you realize. Sana felt her world tilt again. She glanced down at Shadow, his eyes soft but full of a strange wisdom. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, but the image was still blurry. She had always known that Shadow was different, that there was something special about him, but she never could have imagined anything like this. Could the dog really be some sort of guardian? And what was this danger he had been trying to protect her from? The man continued, his voice heavy with an intensity that made Sana's blood run cold. There are things out there, Sana. Forces that are ancient, dark, and they are after you. They've been after you for years, and Shadow has kept them at bay. But now, the time is coming. There's only so much time before the bond between you two is broken. Sana's eyes widened, her mouth going dry. Forces that are after me? She shook her head, trying to make sense of it all. Her mind felt like it was going to explode from the confusion and fear that had taken root. Why me? What's so special about me? She asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and desperation. The stranger paused before answering, his eyes now searching her face, as though he were studying her very soul. You were always meant to be part of this. It was fate. The dog who saved you when you were young, the one who protected you from the attack, he wasn't just a random act of kindness. That dog was part of something much larger, much darker. And now, Shadow is here to finish what that dog began. Sana's breath hitched, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. Something darker? Her head swam with the weight of his words. She looked down at Shadow, who stood like a silent sentinel at her side, the one constant in the sea of confusion. But even now, as he stood before her, she could sense that something was different. Something about the way he carried himself, like he had known this moment was coming. "You've seen things, haven't you?" the stranger asked, his voice quieter now. "Felt things you couldn't explain. The way Shadow reacts to certain things. The way he's always there when you need him, even when you don't realize it. He's always watching, always guarding. That's because he's been sent to protect you from something you've never fully understood." Sana felt a chill sweep through her body. Her thoughts flickered back to all the odd moments, Shadow's strange behavior at night, the growl at the door, the intense way he had been staring at her with those knowing eyes. The connection between them was deep, far deeper than she had ever realized. But what was he protecting her from? The man stepped back slightly, as if giving her space to process. "You're in danger, Sana. You've always been in danger. But there's still time. If you trust Shadow, if you let him guide you, he can keep you safe. But you have to make a choice." Sana felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Her mind was racing, struggling to keep up with the sheer weight of everything that had just been revealed. The fear was suffocating, but there was also a strange sense of purpose growing inside her. This was real. Shadow wasn't just a dog. He wasn't just a companion. He was something else, something ancient and powerful, and he was here for a reason. The stranger's voice broke through her thoughts. "The choice is yours, Sana. You have to decide whether you're ready to face the truth. Are you ready to protect yourself from the darkness that's coming?" Sana looked down at Shadow, whose eyes met hers with a calm understanding. She had always felt this strange pull toward him, a connection that was unexplainable, but now she saw it for what it truly was, a bond, a pact forged long before her time. Without speaking, she knelt down and placed her hand on Shadow's head, feeling the warmth of his fur beneath her fingers. He had been with her through everything, through her pain, her loneliness, her fear. And now, he was all that stood between her and the unknown forces the stranger spoke of. "I trust you," Sana whispered, her voice steady despite the overwhelming weight of the situation. She didn't fully understand everything that was happening, but she knew one thing for sure: Shadow was her protector, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The moment Sana spoke those words, the air in the room seemed to shift. Shadow's eyes softened, the tension in his body easing as if the weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. He nuzzled his head against her hand, his eyes never leaving the stranger, as though acknowledging the gravity of the decision she had just made. It was like an unspoken pact between them, and even though Sana didn't fully understand everything, she felt a wave of calm wash over her. This was right. She had made the right choice. The stranger watched their exchange, his expression unreadable. His eyes flickered with something that might have been approval, but there was also a trace of concern that Sana couldn't ignore. It was as if he had seen something in Shadow, something more than she had, and yet, he didn't share it with her. "Good," the stranger finally said, his voice low but filled with a hint of relief. "You'll need all the strength you can get. Things are about to change, and there's no turning back now." Sana swallowed, the reality of his words sinking in. There had been a weight to the air, a kind of finality in his voice that made her stomach churn with unease. But she couldn't back out now. Not after everything that had happened, not after everything Shadow had done for her. "I don't understand," Sana whispered, her voice trembling with the uncertainty that had crept back in. "What's coming? And why me? Why is this happening now?" The stranger's eyes softened, and he took a step closer, lowering his voice so that only she could hear. "The forces that have been after you, they are patient. They wait, they bide their time. But now, they know you're not alone. And they know that Shadow is more than just a dog." His gaze flicked to the black fur of Shadow's coat. "They'll come for him first. But they'll come for you too, once they realize what's happening." Sana's heart sank. The idea that something was hunting them both sent a shiver down her spine. But it was the mention of Shadow's true nature that stuck with her. More than just a dog, what did that mean? Shadow was never meant to be a regular companion, the man continued, his tone now almost gentle. He's an ancient protector. He has been passed down through generations, always watching over those who are chosen. You're one of them, Sana. You've always been marked, but it wasn't until now that you truly understood why. Sana's mind spun with the weight of what he was saying. Generations? Chosen? None of this made sense. But the strange connection she shared with Shadow, the way he had always been there for her, even when she hadn't asked for it, now felt even more significant. It wasn't just random. It was a bond that had been meant to be, something larger than her comprehension. Before she could ask another question, the stranger stepped back, his gaze narrowing as if sensing something in the distance. Shadow tensed again, his body stiffening, and the air seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. "There isn't much time," the stranger warned, his voice urgent now. "They are closing in." We need to move, now. Sana's heart skipped a beat. Move? Where? What do we do? She stood up quickly, looking between the stranger and Shadow, not knowing where to turn. Get to the old church, he said quickly, his eyes darting toward the darkened streets beyond the house. It's the only safe place left. Shadow knows the way. He'll guide you. The words hit Sana like a thunderclap. The old church? It was a place that had always seemed abandoned, forgotten by most. Her mother had spoken of it once in passing, but it had always been a place she was told to avoid. There was something about it that felt wrong. But the urgency in the stranger's eyes left her no room for doubt. Why the church? Sana asked, her voice shaking. Because that's where the final stand will be made, the stranger replied, his expression grim. It's where the battle begins. Shadow will be your guide, but you must follow him without question. It's the only way you'll survive what's coming. Sana felt her heart race as she looked down at Shadow, whose eyes were locked onto hers with an unblinking gaze. His calm, steady presence somehow gave her the strength to move forward, even though every instinct told her to be afraid. She nodded, trying to steady her breathing. Okay, I'll go. The stranger's lips curled into a tight smile, though there was no warmth in it. Good. But remember, Shadow has his own path to follow. Trust him completely. If you hesitate, if you doubt him, everything will be lost. Sana felt the weight of his words as she turned toward Shadow, who was already walking toward the door, his tail stiff and alert. He glanced back at her, as though waiting for her to follow, and without another word, she followed him into the night. As they stepped outside, the wind howled through the trees, the chill of the night air making Sana's skin crawl. The streets were empty, bathed in the dim glow of streetlights that flickered weakly in the distance. Shadow led the way, his movements sure and steady as he navigated through the winding path she had never noticed before. Every step she took felt heavy with the weight of everything she didn't understand. The stranger's words echoed in her mind, there's a battle coming. Shadow is more than just a dog. He's your protector, your guide. Sana couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as the buildings grew more dilapidated, the streets more deserted. The familiar neighborhood she had known her whole life felt distant, almost unrecognizable now. It was as though something had shifted in the air, and the world she had once taken for granted had turned into something unfamiliar and dangerous. But then, through the shadows, she saw it, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of the night sky. The old church. Its towering spires reached into the heavens, its windows dark and empty like hollow eyes watching her approach. Shadow stopped at the foot of the steps leading into the church, his body tense, his ears pricked. He turned to her, his gaze steady and unwavering. Sana could feel the weight of the moment, the finality of the decision that lay before her. This was it. The beginning of something she could never undo. Sana took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill her lungs. She stepped forward, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. Whatever was waiting for her inside the church, she knew one thing for sure, Shadow would be there to guide her through it. And for the first time, she truly understood what the stranger had meant, the battle was about to begin. The doors of the church loomed in front of Sana, their ancient wood creaking as if the building itself was alive, waiting for her to enter. Shadow stood motionless, his dark eyes fixed on the towering doors. The silence around them felt suffocating, like the air itself was holding its breath. Sana felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. She had never set foot in this church, yet somehow, standing here now, it felt like she had always been meant to be here. There was something almost sacred about the place, something that both comforted and frightened her. She reached out and placed her hand on Shadow's back, feeling his warmth beneath her fingers. His muscles were tense, but his calm presence reassured her. She trusted him. Despite the fear that threatened to overtake her, she knew that Shadow was more than just a dog. He was her guide, her protector, and somehow, he had led her here for a reason. Taking a deep breath, she slowly pushed the heavy doors open, the creak of the hinges echoing through the night air. As the doors swung wide, the inside of the church was revealed, a vast, dimly lit space with high ceilings and stained glass windows that cast muted, colorful light across the worn pews and cracked stone floors. The air was thick with dust, and a faint, musty smell clung to everything. "Welcome," a voice whispered from the shadows. Sana froze, her heart skipping a beat. She knew that voice. It was the same voice that had spoken to her earlier, calm, but filled with an unsettling power. She turned slowly, her eyes scanning the dark corners of the church. There, in the farthest reaches of the room, stood a figure draped in shadow, only their silhouette visible in the dim light. The stranger. His presence seemed to fill the entire church, his dark eyes gleaming in the half-light as he stepped forward, his footsteps echoing eerily against the stone floor. Shadow growled low in his throat, his body stiffening as the man approached, but Sana placed a hand on his back, silently telling him to stay calm. "You came," the stranger said softly, his voice now reverberating off the walls. I was beginning to wonder if you would. Sana took a hesitant step forward, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on her chest. What is this place? What are we doing here? The stranger's gaze softened as he looked at her, though his expression remained serious. This is where it all begins. The battle, the choice, everything. The church has been a place of protection for centuries, but now, it's where the forces you've been running from will find you. This is the last safe place. A shiver ran down Sana's spine as she looked around the church. It felt as though the walls themselves were holding secrets, ancient, forgotten secrets. There was something almost alive in the air, something that seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. What forces? Sana asked, her voice trembling. And why am I in the middle of all of this? Why me? The stranger's expression grew more solemn. You were chosen. Your connection to Shadow is no accident. You are the key to everything, Sana. There's something inside of you, something that has been waiting for the right moment to awaken. Sana's mind raced. Something inside me? The words echoed in her head, but she didn't understand. What could she possibly have inside of her that was worth this much attention? The question burned in her mind, but before she could speak, the stranger continued. You're part of a bloodline that's been marked for centuries. Your mother, she knew what was coming. She tried to protect you, but the time has come for you to take your place. Shadow has always been by your side, keeping you safe, but that's about to change. The darkness is closing in, and when it does, you'll need to make a choice. Sana's breath caught in her throat. Her mother had known something? All these years, she had thought her mother's warnings were just old stories, bedtime tales meant to keep her safe. But now, it was clear that her mother had been preparing her for something far greater. What do I have to do? Sana whispered, her voice barely audible. What's the choice? The stranger stepped closer, his face serious, his eyes never leaving hers. The choice is yours, Sana. You can stay in the safety of the church, hide from what's coming, and live in fear, or you can face it head on. You can embrace your destiny and fight alongside Shadow. But be warned, the road will be dangerous. You won't be able to do it alone. You'll need to trust him completely, and trust yourself. Sana's heart pounded in her chest as the weight of his words settled in. The decision seemed impossible. Could she really choose to face something so dark, so terrifying? Or was it safer to hide, to pretend none of this was happening? Before she could answer, a loud crash echoed through the church, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone, breaking through the door. Sana's eyes flew to the entrance as the doors slammed open with a deafening bang. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the pale moonlight streaming in from behind. The air around them seemed to crackle with an energy that made Sana's skin prickle. Shadow growled, his body going rigid, as the figure stepped forward, revealing itself in the dim light. A tall, menacing figure, dressed in dark robes, their face hidden in shadow, walked slowly into the church. In their hand, they held a staff that seemed to pulse with an eerie, dark energy. The air grew colder as they approached, and the room seemed to grow darker, as if the very light was being sucked into the figure's presence. They found us, the stranger muttered under his breath. It's time. Sana felt her heart race as she glanced at Shadow. He was standing protectively in front of her, his eyes fierce, his body tense, ready to defend her from whatever was coming. This is it, the stranger said. Are you ready to face your destiny, Sana? Before she could answer, the figure raised their staff, and the ground beneath them trembled with an otherworldly power. Sana's heart skipped a beat, and she realized there was no turning back. This was the moment everything had been leading up to. Shadow was by her side, but the path ahead was dark and uncertain. With a deep breath, Sana stepped forward, her heart filled with a new resolve. Yes, she whispered, barely audible over the crackling tension in the air. I'm ready. The battle had begun. The air in the church grew colder still as the figure with the staff stepped forward, their dark presence filling every corner of the room. Sana's heart raced as the shadows around her seemed to stretch, as if they were alive, creeping toward her. The stranger, who had been so calm moments before, now stood rigid, his eyes locked on the dark figure. Shadow growled, his low, menacing sound filling the space. Sana instinctively took a step back, her hand tightening on his fur. The tension in the room was suffocating, and for a moment, it felt as if time had stopped. The only sound was the soft thud of her own heartbeat. The figure raised the staff, and with a sharp motion, the temperature dropped even further. Shadows coiled around the room like tendrils, and for the first time, Sana felt the full weight of the danger that had been lurking in the background. The stranger, still standing beside her, whispered urgently, "Stay close to Shadow. He will protect you, but you must stay strong." Sana nodded, her hands shaking as she clutched Shadow tighter. She didn't know what was happening, but she could feel the presence of the dark figure bearing down on them. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a battle she hadn't asked for but had no choice but to face. The stranger moved closer to her, his eyes never leaving the figure with the staff. "You were right to bring her here," the dark figure's voice rasped, echoing off the church walls. It was hollow, distant, as if it came from somewhere deep beneath the earth. "But she's too weak. She will never be able to stop us. Her power is nothing compared to what's coming." Sana's breath caught in her throat as the figure's words sank in. Her power? What power? She had no idea what the figure was talking about. She was just a girl, terrified and out of her depth. How could she possibly have power? What did any of this mean? Shadow's growl intensified, but he didn't move. His eyes locked onto the figure in a way that made Sana feel like he could see through the darkness itself. There was something fierce, protective in the way he stood by her side, his presence more powerful than any words could describe. The dark figure raised their staff once more, and this time, a ripple of energy spread out from the tip, swirling through the air like smoke. The ground beneath them trembled again, but this time, it felt different. It was as if the earth itself was beginning to shift, to buckle under the weight of whatever magic the figure controlled. "You don't understand," the stranger said, his voice shaking slightly. "This is bigger than both of you. This isn't just about you or her. It's about everything. The balance of the world is at stake." Sana looked between the two men, confusion swirling in her mind. The balance of the world? The weight of those words hung heavily in the air, and she realized that the battle wasn't just for her life, it was for everything she had ever known. "Shadow is the key," the stranger continued, his voice urgent now. "He's not just your protector. He's bound to you. Together, you have the power to stop them." Sana felt a shock of understanding, though it still didn't make sense. Shadow was more than just a dog. He was her protector, her guide, and somehow, the key to everything. But how could she, someone so ordinary, be a part of something this big? The dark figure sneered, a cruel smile twisting beneath their hood. "You think you can stop me? Huh?" They pointed at Sana, and the air crackled with an electric tension. "She's nothing. She's a pawn, a tool, and when she fails, she will be discarded." "No," the stranger interjected firmly, stepping forward. "You don't understand. She's more than you think." In that moment, something inside Sana shifted. The fear that had been choking her, the uncertainty that had clouded her mind, began to clear. She didn't know how she knew it, but she felt it deep inside her, she wasn't just a pawn. Sana's gaze flickered to Shadow. His eyes, glowing faintly in the darkened church, met hers, and in that moment, something inside her clicked. She wasn't alone in this. She had always had Shadow, and with him, she had the strength to face whatever came next. "You're wrong," Sana said, her voice shaky at first, but growing stronger with each word. "I'm not a pawn. And neither is Shadow." The dark figure laughed, but it was a hollow, bitter sound, and for the first time, it seemed to falter, as if Sana's words had pierced through something deeper. "You can't possibly comprehend the power that's about to be unleashed. You're nothing." Sana took a deep breath, stepping closer to Shadow. The air around her seemed to hum with a quiet, untapped energy, something that was slowly beginning to make itself known. She had no idea where it came from or what it meant, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. "You're wrong," she said again, her voice steady now, her resolve building with every passing second. "I'm not nothing. And neither is he." Shadow's eyes glowed brighter as if acknowledging her words, his body tensing in readiness. The stranger stepped back, his expression unreadable as he observed the exchange between them. The dark figure's laughter died in their throat. "Then you will see the truth soon enough," they sneered, raising their staff high into the air. "But don't think for a second that this is over." With a swift motion, they brought the staff down, and the ground beneath them erupted in a blast of dark energy. The air was filled with a deafening roar, and the church seemed to shake to its very foundation. Shadows twisted and writhed around them, reaching for Sana, but Shadow leaped forward in an instant, his body moving with the speed of a predator. He intercepted the dark energy with a snarl, his body glowing with an ethereal light as he shielded Sana from the blast. The force of the collision sent a shockwave through the church, knocking everything off balance. Dust and debris filled the air, and for a moment, everything was chaos. Sana staggered back, her heart racing as she watched Shadow fight back against the oncoming wave of dark magic. She could see it now, the strength in him, the power he had been holding back. He wasn't just protecting her, he was fighting for her, for both of them. The figure stepped forward once more, their staff crackling with dark energy. "You're too late," they hissed. "The end is near." But Sana, her heart pounding in her chest, felt something shift within her. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. And with Shadow by her side, she was ready to fight. The air was thick with tension, the echoes of the dark figure's words still hanging in the air. Sana's pulse was racing, but for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt a strange sense of clarity. Everything inside her told her to be afraid, to run and hide, but the deeper, truer part of her screamed for her to stand tall. Shadow was by her side, his body glowing faintly with an energy she hadn't seen before. His stance was protective, unwavering. The growl in his chest rumbled softly, but it was enough to send a surge of strength through her own veins. She wasn't alone. And as the dark figure raised their staff again, she realized that the moment of decision had come. The stranger beside her stepped back, his eyes shifting nervously between her and the approaching figure. He could sense it too, the air around them was alive with power. The forces in play were beyond anything he had prepared for, and even he wasn't sure if they could survive this. But Sana? She didn't have time for doubt anymore. "Stay close to Shadow," the stranger said one last time, his voice low. "You have no idea what you're about to face. But you have to trust in yourself. Trust in him." Sana didn't respond. Her focus was entirely on the dark figure ahead. She could feel the weight of their gaze, a chilling pressure that pressed in on her chest. But she refused to let it break her. She was done hiding. She was done being afraid. As the figure stepped forward, they raised the staff high, their voice ringing out with a dark chant that made the air vibrate. "The darkness shall consume. The chosen shall fall. The light will fade, and the world will know its true master." The words were like poison, slithering into Sana's mind, but she didn't flinch. She had heard enough. The choice was clear now, there was no more running. She had to stand, to fight, and to face whatever was coming, even if she didn't fully understand it yet. Sana took a deep breath, closing her eyes for just a moment. She felt the connection between her and Shadow, a bond that ran deeper than anything she could explain. It was more than just a protector and the protected. There was something ancient in it, something powerful. And now, she could feel it awakening within her. Opening her eyes, she spoke with more confidence than she had ever known she had. "You don't control me. You don't control us." The dark figure froze, their staff lowering slightly as they regarded her with an unreadable expression. They hadn't expected her to respond this way. They had expected fear, desperation, weakness. Well, they sneered. "It seems the little girl has some fire after all. But it won't be enough." Before Sana could react, the figure thrust their staff forward, releasing a torrent of dark energy toward her. The blast moved so quickly that she didn't even have time to think. The shadows around her seemed to bend, to twist, as the energy rushed toward her. It was the kind of darkness that suffocated, that burned with an unnatural cold. But Shadow was faster. With a leap that was almost too quick to follow, he moved between Sana and the blast, his body glowing brightly as he intercepted the attack. The force of the dark energy collided with his body, but instead of shattering him, something incredible happened. The dark energy seemed to disperse around him, as though he was drawing it in, absorbing it into himself. The dark figure's eyes widened in disbelief. How is this possible?" they hissed. Shadow's form flickered as if a fire was igniting inside him. Sana could see the strength in his eyes, the unwavering resolve that mirrored her own. They were connected, two forces bound together in this moment, and together, they were stronger than anything the dark figure could throw at them. Without warning, Shadow surged forward, his glowing form a beacon of light cutting through the darkness. The dark figure raised their staff again, but Shadow was too quick. With a low, powerful growl, he lunged, his teeth flashing, his body coiling like a spring before unleashing an attack that sent shockwaves through the church. The figure barely managed to raise their staff in time to deflect the blow, but the force of it sent them stumbling backward, their cloak swirling around them. The air crackled with energy as they regained their footing, a furious snarl escaping their lips. "You are nothing but a beast," the dark figure spat, fury blazing in their eyes. "I will break you." Sana felt a surge of power within her, something that had been dormant, something she hadn't realized was there. It was as if the very words of the dark figure had unlocked a door deep inside her. The energy inside her stirred, a deep, primal connection to Shadow, to the battle ahead. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't weak. She had a part to play in this, and she knew what she had to do. "Shadow, now," she shouted, her voice ringing with newfound authority. The command was all he needed. With a fierce snarl, Shadow launched himself at the dark figure once more, this time with a strength that was unstoppable. As he leaped through the air, his glowing form surged with raw power, and in a flash, he collided with the figure, knocking them off their feet. Sana's heart thundered in her chest as the world seemed to freeze. The dark figure struggled beneath Shadow's weight, their staff shattered and useless on the ground beside them. It was clear that the battle had shifted in their favor. But even as the dark figure fought to regain control, Sana knew this wasn't over yet. She felt the power building inside her, the same power that connected her to Shadow, that tied them together in this moment. And with every ounce of strength she could summon, she took a step forward. "I'm not afraid of you," she whispered, more to herself than to the figure. "And I won't stop fighting." The dark figure's eyes narrowed, their expression now a mask of rage. They had underestimated Sana, and now, they would see what happened when you pushed her too far. The church trembled beneath their feet as the dark figure struggled under the weight of shadow. Sana could feel the energy in the room shift, a tension so thick that it almost felt as if the walls themselves might collapse from the force of it. The light from Shadow's form flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the stone walls, as if the battle was pushing the very essence of the church to its limits. For a moment, there was silence. The dark figure lay on the ground, their body partially obscured by the debris, their breath heavy with frustration and rage. Shadow stood above them, his teeth bared, his eyes glowing brighter than ever. He was a force of nature, an unstoppable force determined to protect her. Sana's heart was pounding in her chest. Her breath came fast, but she couldn't look away. She had never felt more alive, more connected to this moment. She had never realized how much power she could have, how much strength lay dormant inside her, waiting for the right moment to awaken. This was that moment. The dark figure's eyes glowed with a malevolent light as they slowly pushed themselves to their feet, their movements sharp and deliberate. The air crackled as they raised their hands, calling upon the dark magic that had been their ally for so long. "You think you can stop me?" The figure's voice was a low growl, filled with venom. "You are nothing but a child, playing at power. You cannot even begin to comprehend the forces at work here." Sana took a step forward, her voice steady but full of defiance. "I may not understand everything, but I know one thing for sure, I'm not afraid of you." The dark figure sneered, their staff crackling with dark energy once more. "Your courage will not save you. The shadows are already closing in." Without warning, the dark figure swung their staff in a wide arc, sending out a wave of dark energy that surged through the air toward them. The blast was powerful, so powerful that the very air seemed to freeze in its wake. But before Sana could even think to react, Shadow leaped in front of her. The force of the blast collided with his glowing body, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though the light would be swallowed by the darkness. Sana's heart skipped a beat, her breath caught in her throat. Was he? Then, with a roar, Shadow pushed forward, his body glowing brighter than ever. The dark energy that had been hurled at them seemed to be absorbed by him, absorbed into the very core of his being. The shadows around them trembled, and for the first time, the dark figure's expression faltered. "No," the dark figure hissed, their voice filled with disbelief. "How is this possible? How is he absorbing my power?" Sana watched in awe as Shadow's form pulsed with energy, his eyes locked onto the dark figure with an intensity that spoke volumes. He wasn't just absorbing the power, he was channeling it. And in that moment, Sana understood. Shadow wasn't just a protector. He was a warrior, an ancient force bound to her for a reason she was only beginning to understand. Shadow's growl deepened as he surged forward again, his body glowing with the dark energy he had absorbed. The light around him blazed brighter, so bright that it seemed to push back against the shadows, creating a barrier of light between them and the dark figure. "You cannot win," the dark figure spat, their anger rising. "You cannot defeat the darkness." But Sana stepped forward, her eyes meeting Shadow's. She could feel the bond between them, the connection that had always been there but had only now come into full understanding. He was not just a dog, he was her partner, her strength, her protector. Together, they could do more than just survive. They could fight back. "You're wrong," Sana said, her voice steady. "You don't control us. We control our fate." With those words, Shadow lunged, his glowing body cutting through the air with lightning speed. The dark figure raised their staff, but it was too late. Shadow's form collided with the figure, a flash of light so bright that it seemed to consume everything in its path. The ground shook, the walls of the church cracking under the intensity of the battle. The dark figure screamed, a sound that echoed through the church like a death knell, as their body was flung back by the sheer force of Shadow's attack. The staff shattered, its dark energy dissipating into the air like smoke. The figure fell to the ground, their body writhing in pain, but they were no longer in control. The power they had wielded so effortlessly was gone, swallowed up by Shadow's light. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The church, once filled with the oppressive weight of darkness, now seemed to breathe a little easier. The tension in the air lifted, replaced by an eerie calm. Sana stood frozen, her heart racing, unsure of what had just happened. Had they won? Had they actually defeated the dark figure? Shadow, panting heavily, stood beside her. His eyes were still glowing faintly, but the battle was over. The air around them seemed to hum with an energy that felt different. They had done it. Against all odds, they had pushed back the darkness. The stranger, who had been watching in silence, finally spoke, his voice filled with disbelief. You did it." Sana turned to him, still in shock. "What do you mean? Is it really over?" The stranger's face softened, his expression now one of reluctant admiration. "You've done what I couldn't. You've unlocked your power. Shadow is bound to you, But you are the one who truly holds the key. You've saved us all. Sana's mind was reeling. She had never thought of herself as someone with power. But in that moment, as she looked down at Shadow, she realized something that changed everything. She wasn't just the girl running from the darkness. She was the one who would face it. And with Shadow by her side, she knew they could face anything. But just as relief began to settle in, a cold chill swept through the air. The ground trembled again, a faint rumble that grew stronger with each passing second. Sana's heart dropped. It wasn't over. Not yet. Before she could even react, a voice, an all too familiar voice, rang out through the church, dark and insistent. You think you've won? It was the dark figure, still alive, still vengeful. This is far from over. And with that, the real battle had only just begun. The church walls shook again, this time with more intensity. Sana's heart skipped a beat as the ground trembled beneath her feet. Shadow, still by her side, bristled, his fur standing on end. The air was thick with foreboding. Despite their victory, despite the dark figure seemingly defeated, Sana felt a chill sweep over her. It wasn't over. She knew it. The voice that echoed through the church now was different, colder, more sinister. It sent a shiver down Sana's spine. You cannot escape your fate, the dark figure hissed. The shadows will rise again, and they will consume you all. Sana's breath caught in her throat. How could this be happening? They had just defeated them. They had pushed back the darkness. Yet, the words that came from the figure were filled with such power, such malice, that Sana couldn't shake the feeling that something even darker was on the horizon. Shadow, stay with me, she whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for his fur. The warmth of his presence grounded her, even as her mind raced with questions. What did the figure mean by the shadows rising again? How could they possibly be stronger than they had already been? Suddenly, the ground beneath them cracked open with a loud, bone-shaking noise. The stone floor splintered and groaned, and from the deep, gaping cracks, thick black tendrils began to emerge, twisting and slithering like serpents. The air grew heavier, and the temperature dropped, the once warm, sacred space now feeling like a tomb. No, Sana gasped, taking a step back as the shadows began to creep forward, reaching toward them like living things, like hungry, twisted hands seeking to pull them into the depths of darkness. She had thought she understood fear before, but this was something else. Shadow growled deeply, stepping in front of her, his glowing eyes fierce and resolute. He wasn't backing down. He was ready, just as he had always been. The dark figure, who had been lying on the ground moments ago, rose again, their form more menacing than before. Their once tattered cloak now billowed around them like smoke, and their eyes glowed with an unholy intensity. You cannot stop this, the dark figure sneered, lifting a hand to the growing tendrils of darkness that were now wrapping around the church like a tightening vice. You cannot defeat what has already been set in motion. The world is mine to control. And soon, there will be no place for light, no place for hope. Sana's pulse raced as she realized the full weight of the situation. The shadows that were growing stronger by the second, they weren't just a force. They were a part of something much larger, something ancient and unstoppable. She looked at the dark figure, then at Shadow, feeling an overwhelming sense of urgency building inside her. She couldn't afford to be afraid anymore. She couldn't afford to hesitate. Shadow, sensing her resolve, turned his head to meet her eyes. In that moment, she understood him. He was more than just a protector. He was her partner, her strength, the one who would fight alongside her until the very end. You're right, Sana said, her voice steady, even though her heart was pounding. You can control the shadows for now. But you will never control us. The dark figure laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed throughout the church. You truly believe you can stand against me, they mocked. You are nothing. But Sana wasn't backing down. She could feel the energy within her, her own power, the connection to Shadow, growing stronger, like a flame igniting in the deepest part of her soul. She didn't know how, but she could feel it. She could feel the power of the light, the power of everything that had fought against the darkness for centuries, coursing through her. And as the tendrils of darkness continued to encircle them, something inside her snapped. She wasn't just the girl from the quiet town anymore. She wasn't just a terrified soul caught in something far beyond her control. She was something else. The light that had always been there, the bond between her and Shadow, erupted in a fierce burst of energy. A bright, blinding light that filled the church and pushed back against the advancing shadows. It was pure, it was raw, and it was powerful. Shadow, glowing even brighter now, joined in. His form shimmered with energy, a radiant beacon in the midst of the chaos. The darkness shrieked in protest as the light pushed forward, tearing through the tendrils like paper, leaving nothing but a faint, dissipating mist in its wake. The dark figure staggered back, their eyes widening in shock and fear. They had not expected this. They had underestimated the power that Sana and Shadow held together. And now, the balance had shifted. You think this is enough? The dark figure spat, their voice trembling with rage. You think a mere burst of light can defeat the darkness? Sana's heart hammered in her chest, but she stood tall. She had no time for doubt. The figure's power was still immense, but they were weaker now, shaken by the strength of the light. They were faltering. No, Sana said, her voice ringing with confidence she hadn't known she possessed before. But I think we've only just begun. With that, she stepped forward, her hand reaching out toward Shadow. As if in response, his glowing form surged with power, and together, they made their stand. The dark figure raised their hands one last time, a swirl of shadows gathering around them. You cannot stop what is already in motion, they hissed. You cannot defeat the darkness forever. But as the dark energy twisted in the air, Sana felt something inside her, something powerful, shift. She knew, deep down, that the true battle wasn't just with the dark figure. It was with the fear and doubt inside her, the fear that had been holding her back all along. You're wrong, Sana said firmly. The light will never fade. Not while we're here. And with those words, the final battle began. The church was a battleground now, a place where light and darkness collided with the ferocity of two ancient forces. The dark figure raised their hands, and the shadows responded, swirling and twisting like angry serpents, creeping closer to Sana and Shadow. The air was thick with malevolent energy, but at the same time, something different, a powerful, burning light, began to take shape between them. Sana's mind raced, her heart thundering in her chest. She had never felt this way before. She was no longer just reacting. She was in control now, fully aware of the power that surged through her veins, the light she had once only dreamed of. The shadows were growing stronger, but so was she. So was Shadow. Together, Sana whispered, not just to Shadow, but to herself as well. The dog's glowing eyes met hers, a silent promise. Together. The dark figure sneered, their eyes burning with rage. You still don't understand, do you? This world belongs to the darkness. It always has, and it always will. But this time, Sana didn't flinch. The figure's words were empty, hollow. She could feel it deep in her bones, there was no place for them anymore. The darkness had thrived for so long, feeding on fear, on pain. But now, the tables were turning. Sana stepped forward, her hand held out toward Shadow, the connection between them pulsing like a beating heart. She felt a surge of power that seemed to rise from the very ground beneath her feet, as if the earth itself was calling upon her strength. You don't control me, she said with absolute conviction. You don't control us. With a mighty roar, Shadow leaped into action. His body surged forward, a flash of brilliant light, faster than the eye could follow. The dark figure reacted in kind, raising their staff to summon the shadows, but Shadow was already there. With a swipe of his powerful claws, he shattered the dark barrier the figure had formed, and for a moment, the room was bathed in light. But the dark figure wasn't done. They weren't going down so easily. With a guttural snarl, they summoned another wave of darkness, far stronger than the last. The tendrils of Shadow shot toward Sana and Shadow with lightning speed, wrapping around them like cold, suffocating chains. Sana gasped as the dark tendrils began to tighten, the cold creeping into her bones, but her fear was no longer the thing that defined her. In that moment, she remembered the bond she shared with Shadow. It wasn't just about protecting her, it was about fighting with her, about standing together. No, she cried, as the tendrils coiled tighter. We're not afraid of you. With that, she focused all her energy into the light that pulsed within her, a glowing warmth that radiated from her body like a beacon. The shadows recoiled, writhing in pain as the light grew stronger. She felt it surge through her like fire, bright and unrelenting, pushing back against the darkness. And then, with a fierce cry, she sent the light crashing forward, breaking free from the dark tendrils and sending a wave of pure radiance toward the dark figure. The figure's scream echoed through the church as the light hit them, shattering the hold the darkness had on them. The dark figure staggered backward, their eyes wide with disbelief. No, how is this possible? They snarled, clutching at their chest as the light burned through their cloak. Sana didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, her hand outstretched, the light in her fingertips gathering in a brilliant orb. The power was so immense now, so raw, she felt it vibrating through her entire being. You were right about one thing, Sana said, her voice filled with fierce determination. This world does belong to the darkness, but not your darkness. She hurled the orb of light at the dark figure with all her might. The explosion of energy lit up the entire church, a blinding flash that sent the shadows scattering in all directions. The dark figure let out a final, guttural scream, their form dissolving into the light, vanishing like smoke in the wind. For a moment, there was silence. Complete and utter silence. Sana stood still, her breath ragged, as she looked at the space where the dark figure had been moments before. The tendrils of darkness that had once filled the air were now gone, dissipating into nothingness. The church, the world around them, seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. But even as she stood there, bathed in the afterglow of victory, she knew something else. Something that sent a chill down her spine. The dark figure was gone, but the shadows had left their mark. Sana turned to Shadow, who was standing beside her, his body still glowing softly. They had won the battle, yes, but the war was far from over. The darkness had been defeated for now, but it would return. She knew that much. It always did. And yet, she didn't feel defeated. She felt stronger. More connected to herself and to Shadow than ever before. The world was changing, and she was changing with it. The stranger, who had been watching silently through the chaos, stepped forward, his face solemn. "It's not over," he said quietly. "The darkness will always return. But now, you know what you are capable of. Now, you know how to fight back." Sana nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving Shadow's glowing form. "I won't stop fighting," she said, her voice steady. "Not now. Not ever." And with that, she turned, walking toward the church's exit. The battle was over, but the journey had only just begun. The darkness would return, but so would she. And as long as she had Shadow by her side, she would face it head on. Because this time, she wasn't just running from the darkness. She was ready to face it. Together. The doors of the church creaked open, revealing the night sky outside. The world had settled into a fragile silence, the weight of their victory lingering in the air. But as Sana stepped into the night, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a cold light over the landscape, but even that didn't seem to offer comfort. It felt different. The stillness of the world around them was unsettling. The shadows, though diminished, had not been fully vanquished. They clung to the edges of her vision, just beyond the light, like a lingering threat waiting to strike again. Sana stopped, glancing back at Shadow. His glowing eyes met hers, and for a moment, she could see the shared understanding between them. They weren't finished, not yet. But now, more than ever, she knew they would fight together. "You did it," the stranger said, his voice hoarse but filled with respect. "You defeated the darkness. I never thought it would be possible." Sana didn't reply at first. She was lost in thought, feeling the weight of what they had just gone through. She had never imagined her life would take such a turn. One moment, she was just a normal girl, running, hiding, living in fear, and the next, she was standing at the center of a battle that could change the world. But this was only one battle. The true war was still unfolding. Did we really win? Sana asked, her voice distant. The stranger's eyes darkened, and he stepped closer, his expression turning grave. Not completely. The darkness may have been pushed back, but it's far from gone. It's been waiting for centuries, building strength. And now, it knows what you're capable of. Sana felt a chill creep down her spine. The last thing she wanted was to face this again. But deep down, she knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "The shadows have learned your power," the stranger continued. "They know how to break through. They know how to find the cracks in your defenses. And if you're not careful, they'll return stronger than before." Sana closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath. The weight of his words felt like a heavy stone pressing down on her chest. Could she really keep fighting? Could she keep going? She felt so small compared to the vastness of this ancient battle, this war between light and darkness. But then, she looked down at Shadow, at the dog who had never faltered, never given up on her, even when she had doubted herself. His eyes shone with an unwavering resolve, and his posture was proud. He was ready. And if he was ready, so was she. "I don't care how strong the darkness gets," Sana said quietly, her voice resolute. "We'll fight. I will fight. And I won't stop. I won't run anymore." The stranger gave her a sharp look, a mixture of admiration and caution in his gaze. "It's not just about fighting. It's about surviving. The shadows are ancient, older than you can imagine. And they won't stop until they've consumed everything. Including you." Sana clenched her fists at her sides, her determination growing with every word. "Then I'll make sure they never get the chance to." The stranger's expression softened for a moment, as if weighing her words, before he nodded. "Very well. But be warned, there are things out there, forces beyond even the shadows, that you won't be prepared for. And you'll need more than just Shadow to survive it." Her heart skipped at the implication of his words. What could be worse than the dark figure they'd just faced? But before she could ask, the stranger turned and began to walk toward the edge of the church grounds. "We'll meet again," he said cryptically, as if he had already said too much. "You'll need all the allies you can find. Trust no one, not even me. But you'll know when it's time. The shadows are never far behind." Sana watched as the stranger disappeared into the darkness, the shadows around him blending with the night until he was nothing more than a fading silhouette. The moment he was gone, the air seemed to shift again. The church, once a place of sanctuary, now felt cold and empty. Sana stood there, her thoughts spinning. There was so much she didn't understand, so many pieces of the puzzle that didn't fit. But one thing was clear, she wasn't done. And neither was the darkness. She turned to Shadow, who was already moving beside her, his pace steady and sure. It felt right, as if they were meant to walk this path together. They didn't know what was coming, but they knew one thing for certain: they were ready for whatever came next. They had survived this far. They had faced the darkness and lived to tell the tale. And they wouldn't stop fighting until the world was safe from it. Sana took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision settle on her shoulders. It was a heavy burden, but it was hers to bear. And with Shadow by her side, she felt stronger than she ever had before. They had already faced the impossible. Now, nothing would stand in their way. As they began to walk into the night, Sana felt something stir deep within her, a spark of hope she had almost forgotten existed. This was just the beginning. The journey ahead would be filled with dangers, challenges, and heartache. But it would also be filled with moments of light. And with Shadow beside her, she knew she wouldn't face it alone. The world was dark, yes. But there was light too. And for as long as she had Shadow by her side, she would fight to keep it alive. As the moonlight bathed them in its pale glow, Sana and Shadow disappeared into the night, unseen, but never alone. The days following the battle at the church were quieter than Sana had ever experienced. The world seemed to exhale a collective breath, as if the storm had passed. But she knew better. The stillness was just the calm before the next wave. She could feel it, the heavy air, the oppressive silence, the lingering shadows just out of sight, always watching. Sana and Shadow had traveled far from the church, finding shelter in small towns and quiet villages, never staying in one place too long. The world felt unfamiliar now, even though it hadn't changed. It was still the same world, but it wasn't the same for her anymore. She was no longer just a girl, hiding from the darkness. She was someone who had faced it, fought it, and survived. But she knew that surviving wasn't enough. There were still so many unanswered questions. Do you think the stranger meant what he said? Sana asked, as she sat by a small fire one evening, her eyes flickering toward the embers. Shadow lay beside her, his head resting on his paws, his eyes alert but calm. The crackle of the fire was the only sound breaking the stillness of the night. Shadow's ears perked up as if he understood her question. She often talked to him, even though he never answered with words. He had never needed to. The bond they shared was more than enough. Sana continued, her thoughts racing. He said we wouldn't be ready, that there was something worse than the darkness we already fought. Do you think he was warning us, or was he just trying to scare us? Shadow lifted his head slightly, his gaze locking with hers. The intensity in his eyes spoke volumes. Whatever it was that was coming, he was ready. And somehow, Sana knew that if Shadow was ready, so was she. The thought gave her a strange sense of reassurance. He had been by her side through everything, through the fear, the pain, the darkness, and somehow, they had made it through. She couldn't imagine going on without him. But the darkness, the shadows, it was still out there, and they weren't going to stop. Not unless they faced it head-on. The crackle of the fire was interrupted by a faint noise. A soft rustling in the bushes behind them. Sana's body went tense, her instincts kicking in. Shadow's head snapped around, his eyes narrowing, alert. The silence stretched out, broken only by the distant sound of wind rustling the trees. Then, a figure stepped from the shadows, emerging from the woods surrounding their camp. Sana's breath caught in her throat as she reached for the small knife she kept hidden beneath her cloak. The figure was tall, cloaked in dark, tattered robes. Their face was hidden beneath a hood, but there was something familiar about them. Shadow growled lowly, his hackles rising, but the figure didn't approach. They stopped a few feet away, their presence radiating an eerie calm. I didn't expect to find you here, the figure said, their voice soft but carrying a weight that made Sana's heart race. Sana's grip tightened on the knife, but she didn't move. Who are you? The figure's lips curled into something resembling a smile. I'm the one who's been watching over you. Sana frowned, her mind working to place the voice, the presence. It sounded like the stranger. The one who had warned her about the darkness. But this person, whoever they were, was different. There was a power about them, an aura that felt almost otherworldly. You're the one, Sana said, her voice uncertain. The one who spoke to us in the church. The figure nodded slowly, their gaze never leaving her. I knew you'd come to this point. The battle you faced is only a fraction of what's to come. You're on the right path, but you'll need more than just light to defeat what's coming. The darkness is shifting, becoming something else. And when it arrives, it will be unlike anything you've ever faced. Sana's stomach tightened. More? She had thought the worst was over. But the figure's words were chilling. What could be worse than the battle they had just fought? What could threaten them now? The figure took a step forward, lowering their hood. As the moonlight touched their face, Sana's eyes widened in shock. It was the stranger, the same one who had guided them, warned them, and then disappeared. But now, his appearance was different. His features were sharper, his eyes deeper, almost as though they held an ancient knowledge that stretched beyond time. "Why are you here?" Sana asked, her voice barely a whisper. She couldn't help the fear that crept into her heart. There was something about this man, this figure, that didn't sit right with her. "I'm here because I need you to understand," the stranger replied, his tone steady. "What you fought was only a fragment of a much larger force. The shadows are part of a greater plan, something that has been set into motion long before either of us were born. You were chosen, Sana. Chosen to stop this, to stop what's coming." Sana's mind reeled. Chosen? But for what? The stranger took another step forward, his gaze locking with hers. "You think your bond with Shadow is enough, but the truth is, there is more to you than you realize. You are the key to this war. You have power, power you have yet to fully understand. And that power will either save us all, or destroy everything." Sana felt a surge of confusion and fear. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't a hero. She was just a girl who had been running from the shadows her entire life. And now she was supposed to stop a war that she didn't even understand? "You don't have to face this alone," the stranger continued, his voice softer now, almost as if he was trying to reassure her. "But you must trust in yourself, in your power. The darkness is coming, Sana. And this time, it won't be so easy to fight." Sana stood frozen, her thoughts swirling. She wasn't ready for this. She had never asked for any of this. But standing here, facing the stranger, the one who knew more than anyone about the darkness, she knew something deep inside. There was no turning back now. "Tell me what I need to do," she said, her voice trembling but strong. The stranger's eyes softened, and for the first time, there was a hint of pity in his gaze. "There's much you still need to learn. But time is running out. And soon, you will face the true darkness. And only then will you know if the light inside you is enough to stop it." And with that, he turned and walked into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Sana stood alone again, the fire flickering beside her. She looked down at Shadow, who was still by her side, his gaze steady, his presence a reminder that she wasn't alone. Not now. Not ever. The darkness was coming. And this time, there would be no escape. But Sana had made her choice. She would face it. And she would fight. And so, the story continues. The battle for the future is just beginning, and the fate of the world lies in the hands of one girl and her faithful companion. Will they be enough to stop the oncoming storm? If you enjoyed this journey and want to follow Sana and Shadow's fight against the darkness, don't miss what comes next. Like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling tales of bravery, light, and hope. Together, we'll continue to uncover the mysteries of the shadows, and the strength hidden within us all. Stay tuned, the darkness is far from over.